shot. Ibrahim Traore was gunned down right before his own bodyguard's eyes. As he lay in a pool of blood, the assassin, a member of the infamous Wagner Group, had already escaped by helicopter. 4 days later, the world learned that Traore wasn't actually dead. Fake blood, fake death. But why? He had secretly flown to Moscow and was caught placing a confidential USB drive in Putin's private office. The information it contained would forever change both Russia and Africa. The morning sun cast long shadows across Independence Square in Ouagadougou. President Ibrahim Traore was addressing a crowd of thousands, his voice resonating through speakers as he outlined his vision for a new Burkina Faso, one free from foreign exploitation and economic servitude. For too long, our resources have enriched others while our people suffer, he declared, his military bearing evident even in civilian clothes. Today, we begin a new chapter where Burkina Faso's wealth serves Burkina Faso's people. The crowd erupted in cheers. At 35, Traore had become a symbol of resistance against neo-colonial influences in West Africa. His recent negotiations with French mining companies had resulted in unprecedented concessions, with royalty rates tripling overnight. His refusal to allow foreign military bases on Burkinabe soil had earned him enemies in Western capitals. And his direct approach to diplomacy, speaking bluntly where others relied on diplomatic niceties, had made him a hero to many across Africa. As he continued his speech, a subtle movement on a rooftop caught the eye of Major Diallo, head of Traore's security detail. Something reflected sunlight, a scope perhaps? Diallo's hand moved to his earpiece, alerting his team to investigate. But it was too late. The crack of a high-powered rifle shattered the morning. Traore's body jerked violently, red blooming across his white shirt. A second shot followed before anyone could react. The president collapsed on the podium, blood pooling beneath him as panic erupted. "Sniper! Secure the president!" Diallo shouted into his radio, racing toward the fallen leader while his team formed a protective circle. In the chaos that followed, few noticed the sleek black helicopter rising from behind a government building 2 blocks away. By the time Traore was loaded into an armored vehicle, the helicopter had disappeared into the horizon, carrying with it the assassin, a precision shooter later identified as Alexei Petrov, a known operative of the Wagner Group, Russia's shadowy private military company. News of the assassination spread across the globe like wildfire. "African reformer gunned down," declared international headlines. Stock prices of French mining companies surged on the news. In diplomatic cables, Western analysts speculated on succession scenarios, while publicly expressing deep concern for the democratic process. At Burkina Faso's military hospital, the scene was one of grim efficiency. The facility was locked down, with only the highest-ranking officials and medical personnel allowed access to the president's body. Minister of Defense, Colonel Amadou Tambora, emerged ashen-faced to address the nation. "It is with profound sorrow that I confirm President Ibrahim Traore has been taken from us by a cowardly assassin's bullet," he announced, his voice breaking. 3 days of national mourning will commence immediately. The Supreme Council for National Security will meet tonight to ensure a stable transition. Across Burkina Faso, citizens wept in the streets. In neighboring Mali and Niger, where Traore had been viewed as an ally against foreign interference, flags were lowered to half-mast. In Paris, a small group of Burkinabe expatriates gathered outside the French Foreign Ministry with signs reading, "France Assassin," reflecting a widespread belief that Western powers had orchestrated the killing. In Moscow, the Russian government issued a terse statement denying any involvement, calling allegations about Wagner Group connections Western propaganda designed to damage Russia-Africa relations. For 3 days, Burkina Faso existed in a state of shocked mourning. Streets were quiet except for military patrols. The international airport remained closed. Foreign embassies advised their nationals to stay indoors as anti-Western sentiment simmered. Then, on the fourth day, something extraordinary happened. At exactly noon, all television and radio stations in Burkina Faso interrupted their programming with a simple message: the truth will be revealed, 20 o'clock hours tonight. Speculation ran rampant. Would the assassin be revealed? Had foreign involvement been proven? Was a coup about to be announced? At the appointed hour, millions gathered around television sets and radios. The screen showed only a blank wall at first. Then a door opened, and a figure stepped into view. Ibrahim Traore, alive, uninjured, and very much not dead. Gasps echoed across living rooms and public squares throughout the nation. People reached out to touch their screens in disbelief. Some fell to their knees praying. Others simply stood frozen, unable to process what they were seeing. My fellow citizens of Burkina Faso, Traore began, his voice steady and clear. I owe you an explanation. 4 days ago, the world witnessed my assassination. That assassination was staged, a deception necessary for an operation of critical national importance. He paused, allowing the shocking revelation to sink in. The blood was fake. The bullets were blanks. My security team, along with a small circle of trusted officials, orchestrated this elaborate scenario to create a specific opportunity, one that has now yielded information that will transform our nation's future. The camera pulled back to reveal a table beside him. On it sat a laptop, several folders of documents, and a small USB drive. While the world believed I was dead, I embarked on a covert mission to Moscow. Our intelligence had indicated that certain Russian interests, specifically the Wagner Group, were negotiating with former colonial powers to manipulate resource rights across West Africa. These negotiations directly threatened our sovereignty and the economic reforms we have worked so hard to implement. Traore picked up the USB drive, holding it for the camera to see. This small device contains evidence of a vast conspiracy, not just against Burkina Faso, but against much of resource-rich Africa. It includes contracts, recordings, and banking transactions that outline how Wagner Group has been serving as an intermediary between Western corporations and corrupt officials across our continent, creating the illusion of Russia-West competition while actually facilitating the continued exploitation of African resources. What Traore described next stunned even the most cynical observers. According to the files, Wagner Group had been secretly contracted by a consortium of Western mining and energy companies to create strategic instability in specific African regions, just enough to justify their continued security presence while ensuring resource extraction remained uninterrupted. The most disturbing aspect, Traore continued, is that Wagner has been playing both sides, accepting payment from Western interests while presenting themselves to African nations as an alternative to Western imperialism. In reality, they have been ensuring that whoever appears to be in control politically, the economic exploitation continues unabated. The question on everyone's mind was finally addressed. How had Traore obtained this information? The answer was audacious beyond imagination. Our intelligence indicated that complete documentation of this arrangement was stored in a secure server, accessible only from a specific terminal in a private office at the Kremlin. With my supposed death providing the perfect cover, I traveled to Moscow under a diplomatic alias, ostensibly representing Burkinabe officials coming to discuss mining cooperation. The camera showed grainy security footage of Traore, disguised with glasses and a different hairstyle, moving through what appeared to be ornate Kremlin corridors. Through methods I cannot disclose to protect those who assisted us, I gained access to this terminal for exactly 7 minutes. enough time to download the complete archive of Africa-related operations. He paused, a slight smile crossing his face. I was nearly finished when security was alerted. My extraction was complicated. This was a masterpiece of understatement. Other sources would later reveal that Traore had barely escaped the Kremlin, evading Russian security forces in a chase through Moscow before being extracted by loyal operatives with connections to sympathetic elements within Russia itself. Officials concerned about Wagner's increasingly independent operations. I need to be clear, Traore emphasized. This was not an operation against the Russian people or the Russian state. Rather, it was an action to expose how multinational interests, Western corporations, private military companies, and corrupt officials have created a system that perpetuates Africa's exploitation regardless of which global power appears to have influence. He then delivered the most consequential revelation. The contents of this drive have been secured in multiple locations worldwide, with instructions for automatic release to international media should anything happen to me or our government. The full documentation will be shared with every African nation within 48 hours, along with the United Nations Security Council. The implications were seismic. The files allegedly detailed operations in 14 African countries, involving companies from France, the United States, China, and Russia. They outlined how Wagner Group had effectively become a private contractor facilitating resource extraction regardless of geopolitical appearances, sometimes even creating conflicts specifically to justify security contracts that enabled continued exploitation. As Traore's broadcast continued, scenes from across Burkina Faso showed crowds erupting in celebration. The president they had mourned was alive. The leader who had promised to reclaim their resources had pulled off an intelligence coup that strengthened their position immeasurably. International reaction was chaotic. The Kremlin initially denied the authenticity of the documents, then switched to claims that they had been manipulated. Western governments expressed concern about potential disinformation, while simultaneously distancing themselves from any connection to Wagner Group. But as the files began circulating among African governments, the denials became increasingly difficult to maintain. Bank transfers, recorded conversations, and contractual agreements created an irrefutable paper trail of coordination between entities that publicly positioned themselves as adversaries. In the days that followed, Traore revealed more details about the operation. The assassination had been meticulously planned with cinema-quality special effects and the assistance of a loyal medical team. The sniper shots had been carefully synchronized with blood packs hidden beneath his clothing. Even Major Diallo's reaction had been rehearsed, though most of the security detail believed the assassination was real until hours after the event. Only 6 people knew the truth. Traore explained in a follow-up address. This tight circle was essential for the operation's success. The global order began shifting almost immediately. African nations with significant natural resources announced emergency reviews of all contracts with foreign entities. Several countries expelled private military contractors, regardless of national origin. A summit of West African nations was hastily convened in Abidjan to establish a united front on resource sovereignty. Wagner Group's operations across Africa disintegrated as their double dealing was exposed. More significantly, a schism developed between the organization and the Kremlin, as Russian officials distanced themselves from what they now characterized as rogue elements operating without state sanction. In Western capitals, the exposure created political crises as connections between corporations, intelligence agencies, and private military companies came under sudden scrutiny. Congressional hearings were announced in Washington. A vote of no confidence was called in Paris. Corporate executives resigned abruptly, citing personal reasons. 2 weeks after his miraculous resurrection, Ibrahim Traore addressed the African Union in Addis Ababa. Representatives from all 55 member states listened intently as he proposed what would become known as the Ouagadougou Doctrine. Africa's resources must benefit Africa's people first, he declared to thunderous applause. Foreign investment is welcome, but only on terms that respect our sovereignty and ensure the primary beneficiaries are our citizens. The era of extraction without equitable return is over. The doctrine outlines specific principles: minimum 51% local ownership of all resource operations, transparent contracts available for public review, independent environmental and labor monitoring, significant investment in local processing capacity rather than raw export, and perhaps most radically, a continent-wide resource intelligence sharing network to prevent foreign interests from playing African nations against each other. For too long, we have been divided by borders drawn by others, Traore said, his voice rising with conviction. These artificial divisions have made it easy for external powers to negotiate favorable terms with individual countries that would never be accepted if we stood united. Today, that changes. The boldness of the plan matched the audacity of the intelligence operation that had made it possible. Critics called it economically unfeasible, politically naive, and diplomatically reckless. But across Africa, a wave of public support made it difficult for leaders to reject the principles without appearing to betray their own people's interests. As for Traore himself, the assassination and Moscow operation transformed his status from regional leader to Pan-African icon. Security concerns became paramount, with intelligence suggesting multiple actual assassination plots, now in development by entities threatened by the revelations. In a private moment captured by a documentary filmmaker granted rare access, Traore reflected on the risks he had taken. "Was I afraid in Moscow? Of course," he admitted with a slight smile. "But there is a difference between fear for yourself and fear for your people. Personal courage is simple. You overcome your own fear. Leadership courage is harder. You must act despite knowing that failure affects not just you, but millions who depend on you." 6 months after the fake assassination and the real Moscow operation, tangible changes were evident across the continent. Resource contracts were being renegotiated with terms previously thought impossible. Processing facilities were breaking ground, keeping more value-added production within African borders. A pilot program for a Pan-African resource monitoring system was operational in 7 countries. Most significantly, the leverage in negotiations had fundamentally shifted. When foreign corporations or governments threatened to withdraw from unfavorable terms, they increasingly found African nations willing to explore alternatives, including developing domestic capacity or partnering with competitors offering better terms. The Wagner Group files had broken the illusion that African nations had to choose between Western exploitation and Russian or Chinese exploitation. Instead, a new path was emerging, one where African resources could be developed primarily for African benefit, with external partners welcome but no longer dominant. On the first anniversary of the assassination, Traore stood once again in Independence Square. The crowd was twice as large as the year before. His security was significantly enhanced, with counter-sniper teams visibly positioned on surrounding rooftops. "1 year ago, I died in this square," he began, drawing laughter from the crowd. "It was a strange experience, I must admit. But that symbolic death allowed for a rebirth, not just for me, but for our approach to sovereignty." He outlined the progress made. Renegotiated contracts had increased government revenue by 340%, enabling the elimination of school fees nationwide and the construction of 17 new hospitals. Processing facilities for gold and manganese had created thousands of skilled jobs. Agricultural reforms had reduced food imports by 30%. But our journey has just begun, he cautioned. Those who profited from the old system have not accepted its end. They adapt, they seek new avenues of influence, they wait for our vigilance to wane. Indeed, the pushback had been significant. Economic pressure, political isolation attempts, and destabilization efforts had tested Burkina Faso's resolve. Several neighboring countries that had adopted similar policies faced mysterious insurgencies in their resource-rich regions. International loans had suddenly become difficult to secure, yet the momentum continued building. The Ouagadougou Doctrine had evolved from radical proposal to practical framework, with technical teams now helping implement its principles across the continent. A generation of young African economists, lawyers, and negotiators was emerging, specializing in resource sovereignty and equitable development models. In diplomatic circles, a new term had entered the lexicon: Traore proofing, referring to corporations' efforts to structure deals that could withstand the heightened scrutiny and sovereignty demands inspired by the Burkinabe leader's approach. As Traore concluded his anniversary address, he held up a USB drive similar to the one he had risked everything to obtain in Moscow. "Information remains our most powerful weapon," he said. "Not bullets, not bombs, but knowledge. Knowledge of our rights, knowledge of our worth, knowledge of how the systems that extract our wealth operate. With this knowledge, we transform not just contracts, but consciousness." The USB drive gleamed in the sunlight as he raised it higher. "They thought killing me would silence a voice. Instead, it amplified a movement." Across the square, thousands of citizens raised similar USB drives into the air, a symbolic gesture that had spontaneously emerged during the speech. Each drive contained educational materials about resource rights, contract transparency, and economic sovereignty, designed to be shared within communities. The image, thousands of raised drives catching the sun like tiny beacons, would become iconic, reproduced in murals and artworks across Africa and beyond. It represented a new kind of power, one based not on weapons or wealth, but on shared understanding and collective action. As for the original Wagner files, they had been secured in multiple locations worldwide, protected by encryption and distributed systems. Their contents continued to reverberate through international relations, corporate boardrooms, and intelligence agencies, a digital time bomb that had already exploded, but whose shockwaves would continue for generations. The fake assassination had fooled the world for 4 days. The information it helped obtain would reshape Africa for decades. What do you think about this story? Would you have believed this dramatic fake assassination plot? Do you think information and knowledge can be more powerful weapons than military force? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to see more thrilling stories about Ibrahim Traore's bold leadership. Let us know in the comments what other daring missions you'd like to learn about.